Hello, everyone. Welcome to the final episode of CyberSafe Foundations, a Day in the Life series. My name is Okechanita Diambo, and I'm honored to be your host for today's sessions. As you know, that our audience includes our Cyber Girls Fellows who have been training hard for the past few weeks and are ready to take on a new challenge in the cybersecurity field. And for that, we are starting our session today with the Cyber Girls mantra. So wherever you are, I just wanted to say the Cyber Girls mantra as I read it out also on this other side. I am knowledgeable, resilient, and excellent. I am a fountain of value and ardent problem solver. I am a voracious learner, so nothing is too difficult for me to master. I am a doer with a genius intellect. I am a cyber girl. And also, like over the past few weeks, we've had the privilege of hosting various professionals in the cybersecurity who have shared some of the who has shared some of their variable insights in the cybersecurity industry from their day-to-day life, what they do, and we've learned about the challenges they face, the strategies they use to stay ahead of the game, and also like the passion that drives them to succeed. And so today we have a very special guest, Winifred Seta Smith, a GRC professional, who will be sharing their story with us. And this is an opportunity not only to learn from a seasoned professional, but also to reflect on the amazing journey that we've been together for the past few weeks in the adult sessions. I'd also like to take a moment to thank our partners and sponsors who've made our Cyber Girls Fellowship possible through their technical support. From InfoSec Institute, Cisco Networking Academy, Practical DevSecOps, ACX, Microsoft ADC and ATO, Security Blue Team, Hack the Box, Checkpoint Secure Academy, AWS Training and Certification, and ISC2. So let's make the most of this final session and learn as much as we can from our wonderful guests. So without further ado, let's get started. Like I said, our guest today is Winifred Seta Smith, and she's a GRC professional, and I'll read her bio for you. Winifred works with MTN as the Enterprise Risk Senior Manager and is currently the AG Chief Risk and Compliance Officer. She's a telecoms and mobile financial services business leader with a professional experience of over 20 years of experience. Winifred is currently leading and managing business risks and compliance across the operations. Her work background is enriched by experiences from different disciplines, including information technology, enterprise risk management, business continuity and information, and cybersecurity management. Winifred has a BSc Honors in computer science and is certified in ISO 27001, ISO 22301 with PECB, certified in quantitative risk management, CQRM, and is a certified risk specialist, CRS. Winifred is passionate about coaching and mentoring the youth into realizing their potential and exerting influence where they find themselves. Hi, Winifred. That's such a beautiful bio.
Hi, thank you very much.
Yeah, we are so honored to have you today, joining us for our last deal session. And kindly introduce yourself briefly to our audience.
Well, I guess, Okesh, you have really introduced me. There's nothing much to say, but just to say that I'm a very passionate person and I really enjoy, things like this, having interaction with the young ones and, peers just to learn and also bring to bear some of my knowledge. So I guess that's
Right.
it. But just to also know that I'm a mother of 5 and 3 girls and 2 boys. And they keep me very much active on a daily
That's so
basis
beautiful.
as well.
Nice. Thank you so much. All right. Now let's dive more into your background a bit. We are curious to know how you ended up in this exciting field of governance, risk, and compliance. Like, what did you always know that you wanted to pursue this path, or did something specific inspired you to pursue GRC? We really want you to tell us about it. Like, how did you end up specializing in this area? Like, did you have mentors who guided you, or did you just dive in and say, yes, this is what I want to do?
Yes, like as you've indicated, my background is computer science, and I've worked in IT for well over 9 years, and basically dealing with databases, provisioning systems and managing data and things like that. And I did that for 9 years. And at some point, I thought, look, I like the work I'm doing, but I wanted to move into something different. So, at that time, so I started work in 2001. And so 9 years will be in 2000, roughly about 2010. Business continuity was coming into, the discipline was coming into businesses, and it was something I was very curious about and I wanted to learn. And so I started to do certifications in those areas. Of course, I did have some coaches, on-the-job coaches that, helped me in some areas, not so much of my career path, but at least give me an idea of, what to be looking out for, how to position yourself and things like that. So I started to work around that. And an opportunity came to apply for the job, which I did. And I was working, I became the first person actually to start working in business continuity in the organization. So business continuity, as you all know, it's a risk management function. So it sort of brought out my curiosity to see what else is around that side. And somewhere along the line, the business decided to move that function from IT into the risk management area. The love for GRC began. So I went into risk management. I started learning towards information security. I wanted to understand all the facets of risk, because in the environment I was working with, it wasn't only business continuity that was an issue from a risk perspective. And it wasn't only enterprise risk that was an issue from a risk perspective. And you wanted to understand and put yourself in a place where you can be a valued and trusted advisor. Because as a governance risk person, you should be able to advise the business. And the only way you can do it is to understand what you're doing. So that's how I started to grow my interest in governance, risk, and compliance.
Wow, thank you so much. I'm trying to look at our audience, and they're very excited to have you here. They're joining from different parts. I'm seeing Cameroon, Zimbabwe, and it's so beautiful. So can you give us a glimpse into the day-to-day activities and responsibilities of a GRC professional? Like what are some of the common tasks that you undertake on a regular basis? Like, we really want to know what tasks and responsibility you encounter on your day-to-day work that keeps you on your toes in the dynamic world of cybersecurity and compliance.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, as you know, the GRC, just to break it down, and I'm sure everybody understands, is governance, risk, and compliance. And just looking at this acronym alone is a very huge portfolio. And there's no way that I alone can actually manage governance, risk, and compliance as a professional. So one very critical thing is that there are lots of cross-functional and stakeholders within this particular portfolio. But what's important is, before you can actually know what your day-to-day job is to have a plan. And for every business person, we know that from a business perspective, every business does what they call business plan in the beginning of the year, to identify what are we going to do in the year, how are we going to make our revenue, what's the revenue we're looking at, and all that. The same way as a governance, risk, and compliance person, you need to be able to have, in quotes, a business plan. You look at the business objectives and you ask yourself, what are the threats that will impact those objectives? How do I identify those threats, and how do I make sure that I have a plan? Of course, in the world that we are, as you said, there's so many changing dynamics in the world. So there'll be things like unforeseen, things that you didn't even see doing your business analysis or your business plan documentation, which will come and hit you. And that's where it's very important that things like putting in place a crisis management plan and all that is very important. So on a day-to-day basis, what we basically do is to look at the plan and see if our plan is actually always fit for purpose. Because you always want to ask yourself, if I said this year I'm going to have risk assessment on certain systems within the year, are those systems still fit for purpose within the IT division? Are those systems still fit for purpose within the marketing division? And should I change my plan? Should I be looking at somewhere else? So on a day-to-day basis, we're basically doing risk assessments within the organization. We're looking at the policies that we have to put in place. Is it aligned to the cybersecurity standards? If we are doing assessments, what are the controls we're looking at? What are the gaps? And so you would see that on a daily basis, we're having meetings with the different divisions, because you want to understand what are they doing from a business plan perspective, and how can your plan fit into that to support? Because eventually, we all want to make sure that we are protecting the bottom line, which is the revenue. And it's also important that as a governance risk professional, we are more proactive than reactive. And most of the time, what makes us more proactive is doing the assessments beforehand, making sure that as part of everything, risk assessment is part of the design. It doesn't come after the facts, because the moment it comes after the facts, then we tend to become reactive. So on a daily basis, these are some of the things that we look at, engaging the different divisions. If you see my schedules in the morning, I have tons of meetings with different product managers. If I have to be in regulatory meetings, if I have to be part of some discussions to make sure that are we properly identifying the risks. So that's the job of a compliance governance risk analyst. But it's also very important to note that there are people who will be specialized in the different areas. So you'd have people, because when we talk about compliance, remember, we're talking about compliance to regulations. You need people like the lawyers to give you a view whether that compliance is aligned to regulatory or legal requirements. How are we implementing it? Are we implementing this effectively? We notice there's a gap here. The regulator is saying, do this. Are we doing that effectively? And you need a lawyer to be able to tell you that, because eventually these things become legal at some point, depending on what the requirement is. So in a nutshell, that's the life of a GRC person. You wake up in the mornings with many meetings you have to sit on. And most importantly, we have to churn out reports, because when you do your work and the report doesn't come out. So if you do a pen test and you don't have a report to show for that pen test, how does the business implement your findings? If you do a risk assessment and you don't have a report, how does the business implement your findings? So in a nutshell, that's the day-to-day job of a governance, risk, and compliance analyst.
We're following. Thank you so much. So you've actually said how dynamic the world is, and also like you as a GRC professional, we know like you said that staying updated with we want to know like how you're staying updated with the latest regulations and compliance requirements. It's not easy. So can you please take us through how you keep your organization on top of these changes and ensure that everyone is aware of the requirements, and like what strategies do you use to make sure that all stakeholders are informed and are up to date with the latest regulations and compliance in your organization?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. So it's very important that as part of the analysis process, you do what we normally called an assessment of your compliance universe. So for every business, there are different regulations and laws that apply. So you should be able to take stock of those laws and unpack them, and make sure that you have people who are who take ownership in implementing that. So within that portfolio, what we normally do is to say that we have a complete universe of compliance requirements, and within the business, we look to see which area is responsible to implement this. And on a daily basis and a weekly basis and a monthly basis, we share the universe. We have discussions to say, this is the regulation that applies to this area. This is what we know the control is, and this is what's left to do. What are we doing around that? What are the timelines? And then we put in a plan. It's also important to know that it isn't all the regulations that might be, how should I say, it's urgent or critical. So we try to put them in categories to say, this one impacts our business, for example, license, and it is most critical that we make sure that we close it within a certain time frame. And as you all know, when the regulator sets requirements, sometimes they put timelines on it, sometimes they give you quite some time to implement. So the ones that have timelines, you have to make sure that you implement them within those timelines. Otherwise, then you have a fine on your head, because as a compliance person and being abreast with the regulations, the thing you're preventing is that the company is fined for one thing or the other. So that's one thing. And the other thing is also key to say that all the very critical compliance requirements that may be lacking behind has to be made known to top leadership, because that's where you sort of flag what is needed to do, and so that we do not sort of lose sight of what is critical. So first, the compliance universe, communicating those to relevant teams to make sure that they know and they put in a plan, and also lastly to make sure that you communicate that to top management. But another key thing to push ownership, because remember, we cannot do it alone from ourselves, is to make sure that people sign off on the implementation plans that they've put in place, and to make sure that those are also followed so that there's ownership. So aside the compliance universe, it's also important that there may be certain requirements that were not there at the time that we are taking stock. And so it's important to have a process of scanning the environment, looking at emerging risks. And if you're an organization that is very abreast with, at least getting a hint of what the new requirements that are coming in, it's important to be part of that engagement with the regulators. And so I can give you an example. When mobile money, for example, started years back, the regulators did not have a regulatory act or anything like that to guide it. So we also made sure that we were part of that narrative to be part of the engagement, to see how the regulation is going to go, to advise, to also give an input. It's quite important so that eventually whatever comes out includes the industry knowledge before the law is passed, because once it's passed, you don't have opportunity to change anything. So those are the two key things I would say overall. First, the compliance universe, and then make sure that you have an emerging, a process to scan the environment for emerging risks and laws and regulations that will be coming through.
Wow, thank you so much. That was quite a broad answer. And I'm just having a follow-up for the question that we just answered. We know that when it comes to the world of cybersecurity, there's a myriad of challenges and obstacles that professionals in the field must navigate on a daily basis, from, like we say, the ever-evolving threats to complex compliance regulations. I think that the job can certainly be daunting and intense most of the time. So as a GRC professional, what are some of the biggest challenges and obstacles that you've seen as cybersecurity professionals face, specifically in the GRC, and how can someone determine if they're prepared to tackle these challenges?
Yeah, so I will give you three of them. So one is, I think I did mention it in my first submission, that oftentimes the business changes very fast and the regulators fall behind on releasing regulations and laws for certain changing environments. Today, as you know, digital is something that's growing wild in a lot of the organizations, and as governance, risk, and compliance people, we're also trying as much as possible to see how do we continuously, proactively assess digital, because it's going very fast. Look at the WhatsApps of the world. ChatGPT is here. How do you constantly abreast with that? And so that's key. So being part of that regulatory process is very important. And that means that your key stakeholder will be the regulatory team within your organization. The other one is that if you look at the different facets of areas that a governance risk person will deal with, even if I take cybersecurity alone, we're doing pen tests, we're running risk assessments, we're looking at different controls, we're implementing. One key thing is too many manual processes and one-stop system where we can have certain things quickly automated, because automation makes proactiveness very easy, so we can close out gaps very quickly. The third thing, perhaps I'll even add a fourth one, but the third thing would also be technology. As technology is changing so fast, how do we ensure that we align? And that's a critical challenge. It means that we also need to make sure that we are abreast with our knowledge, learning new things, open-minded, putting in the new policies, change management processes must be on point. And then last but not the least, which is actually also another challenge, is how, as a risk and compliance analyst, do you marry and balance compliance targets as against performance targets? And it's very important that you are not seen as outside your organization, but with the organization. So that means that you need to make your organization understand what the compliance implications are to the organizations. And most often, we see, because we're too technical, we focus on the technicalities instead of also understanding what the business targets are and what it means for the overall organization, and how to make sure that we marry those so that we always stay compliant. And this is very important, because if there's misalignment in those areas, the challenge is that your compliance efforts will not come into fruition, because people will not be compliant, not because they don't want to be compliant, but the two systems are not talking to each other. And so then there is some kind of misalignment. And that creates a gap where we could have issues. So I think these are the four key challenges on top of my mind that are quite important from a governance, risk, and compliance perspective. And also, if we look specifically at cybersecurity professionals, it's important that if I'm going to do a pen test, I should be able to tell my organization how that pen test, the fallouts from that pen test, can impact the overall business targets if it's not put in place and the implementation is not done to, especially when the findings are communicated. So those are four key things that, from my perspective, is very critical for cybersecurity professionals to focus on, and as much as possible, make sure that we are putting in place responses for these.
Wow. Thank you so much. This is just a reminder to our participants to keep on dropping their questions. Yes. If you have any question for our guests, just keep on dropping them. I'll be reading them after we're done with the conversation. So let's switch gears for a moment and talk about career advice. Like I said, the majority of those who are joining are our Cyber Girls Fellows, the third cohort. And as a cybersecurity professional who has navigated the transition into GRC, like, what tips would you offer to someone who is just starting out in their cybersecurity career and considering moving into GRC? What do you think are the best ways for them to prepare themselves for success in this field?
Well, I think the most important thing is to know yourself and know where you want to be. So in every organization, in some organizations, they might not have this level that I'm come to speak about. But in every organization, governance, risk, and compliance is normally in 3 stages. So if you look at the governance structures, you'd see that it is defined in first line defense. We call them first line defense, where first line defense is basically the people who are responsible for their areas, okay? And then we have second line defense, which is people like us who are supposed to be guiding the business on how to analyze risk, what frameworks we're using, what are the key controls we should be looking at, and what's supposed to be implemented and how those are supposed to be implemented. And then third line is audits. So you need to know yourself and ask yourself, do I want to be part of people who do the implementation? So for example, I'll be a cybersecurity implementer within an organization. Do I want to be second line? Do I want to be part of the risk assessment team? In some organizations, the risk assessment team is also in first line. Do I want to do compliance, management? Do I want to get into risk management or governance? And then lastly, do you want to be a security auditor, which will be the third line? And within the 3 lines, there's so many different paths that you can take. Some of which are being a pen tester from first line, even second line does pen testing sometimes, and even the auditors do pen testing sometimes. Risk manager, security risk managers, governance professionals, basically looking at policies. What policies are we putting in place? How does that policy align with compliance requirements? How does that policy align with internal requirements? So these are the things that you should ask yourself. Once you have a clear view of what you want to do, knowledge is very key, because if you don't get yourself ready by acquiring the necessary skills, you cannot be ready when the opportunity comes. So once you make that decision, then you need to start doing your certifications or making sure that you get the required knowledge so that you get yourself ready for the next job. And then the next thing is to put that in your CV and go looking for the job. It's also important to note, like I indicated initially, that GRC is a big area, and governance on itself has different standards that you need to certify for. Risk management on itself has so many different standards that you need to certify for, and compliance on itself has so many things that you need to certify for yourself on itself. And so depending on if you are an entry person, you may want to specialize in certain areas. As you grow higher, you may want to be more generalized, because as you get into leadership position, you'd find out that it's not so much of specialization, but it's more of generalization. You need to understand 360 what the whole portfolio looks like. So you might be getting, your portfolio more bigger, but it's important to start small and scale up as you go up. I hope I have, answered the question quite clearly for my cyber girls.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much for the tips that we need to get when you want to get to cybersecurity field. Like, we all know that the demand for GRC professionals is actually growing. You've actually said that some businesses still don't have like the GRC department in their businesses, and it's important to know. We really want to know what employers are looking for in GRC candidates, especially for entry level. Like, can you give us some insights into the more sought after skills and competencies in their field? And beyond that, how can someone acquire and develop these skills?
Yes, thank you. Okesh, right? Okesh.
Yes.
Yes. So I think for what job the job recruiters are looking for would be very dependent on the job role that is being applied for, that has been communicated. And I think it's important that you skill up, because if I'm going to employ somebody into a space, I'm not a recruiter, but if I'm going to do that into a space to do risk assessment, I may want to see that you have some skills at least in the risk assessment area. And I think it's important that sometimes people say, oh, I came out of school, you're asking for work experience. It's important to know that you could use things like the cyber girls as your work experience, internships for your work experience. You don't have to be in a full-time job to use as work experience. And it's important to be able to articulate what you've learned during that time. But what is key is to make sure that your portfolio of qualifications aligns to the job requirements. That's very key. Second is how you're going to articulate your experience in that area that you are applying for. And then thirdly, it's important to also note that as technical people, more and more the job areas are expanding so much that it's important to also have some soft skills around team management, around soft skills that are not so technical. that can give you a plus or an added view. And so I would say if you're applying for a job, it's important that the job requirement is very clear to you. You must really understand what is required before you apply. So it makes it easy to prepare for that. Before you go into the job, the interview.
Oh, thank you. I lost you a bit.
You lost me?
Yeah, I lost you, but I think I cannot hear you.
Okay, so but did you hear what I said though?
Yes, I heard what you said. I heard what you said. So we can just go on. Like, I'm
Okay.
curious about the different career paths and specializations within the GRC field. You've actually said how broad the field is. You're like, could you share some insights on what those are and how someone can figure out which one aligns with their skills and interests? And while we are on the topic of figuring out the specializations, what certifications are available in this field and how are they valuable, especially for entry-level personnel?
Yeah. So I think we've said it in initial ones. So we know we have certifications like for cybersecurity people, we have certifications around cybersecurity implementers from PCB. You can also do certifications around your pen if you want to be a pen tester. We also have governance and compliance certifications. If you want to have a certification around risk management, you can look for certified risk management courses to do to give you a view. But ISO has one that is a very good guide, which is the ISO 3100 certification that gives you a very good guide. And for me, I think it's a very good one for especially people who are starting to understand risk management because it gives you a very good framework. We also have things like C-Risk. C-Risk is, from where I sit, I feel is more for people who've been in the field and at least understand the process. And it's more specific to what you must do as a risk person when you find yourself in IT. There's also CIMA. You can do CIMA if you want to be an auditor, for example. So there are quite a myriad of certifications you can do. But I think what's important, as I've initially said, is to know what you want, because without which you will not be able to narrow it down to the certification that you want to have. Look at what interests you. And I know when I had my cyber girls last year, we have to go through asking ourselves, what interests me? Am I somebody who wants to be in governance? Do I want to do pen testing? Am I interested in? You need to know what makes you tick to be able to narrow it down on the certifications to do. And it's only you that can decide or make that decision for yourself. We can guide you through the process. However, you should take that responsibility to make that decision for yourself, because eventually you must enjoy what you do. Because if you don't enjoy what you do, you cannot make the impact in the area that you work. So it's quite important.
Wow, thank you so much. I love the idea of we have to enjoy what we want to do. Like, you can't go on and do something that you won't enjoy for the rest of your life. Like, you will just be
Exactly.
there having so many regrets. Why did I do this? Or I should have done that. So it's actually good for someone to know what they really love doing so that they can venture into it. So I'm sure our participants have learned some valuable lessons from you. So we really want you to share with us like the biggest lesson you've learned early in your GRC career that has really made you stay throughout your professional journey. We'd love to hear how the lesson really impacted your career and shaped your approach to your work.
So for me, the biggest lessons I've learned is how to add value to the organization. And I remember those times, the very early stages when I made presentations to the board, and you're not able to quantify what the impact you're talking about. as against the ask for budgets to implement it, they are not ready to listen. But the moment you are able to say that the gaps we find impacts this percentage of revenue, they are very open to listen, because that means that if I give you budgets to implement this, and this is the end results that we're going to get. That's one. How to make sure that you articulate properly the ask from a governance perspective and a risk and compliance implementation perspective is very key. Number two is that as a risk person, because the business is inclined to listen to you, it's important that you earn your place as a trusted advisor. And if I say a trusted advisor, is what I mean by that is we cannot just go talking about risks without having fact-based information for the business. And so if I say that I find a risk in this place, this is the the gap, it has to be fact-based. How was that articulated? You could say we did a pen test, we had an engagement with the team, this is how the numbers are looking like, this is how the gaps are looking like, these are the incidents that have occurred within the last 2 months, and this is how it's impacting the business. And you must make sure that the areas that you're assessing, the owners of the place take ownership of that, and they also have to testify, the information, and that makes you a trusted advisor. And it's important that the information you also give out is not half and half, because the moment you give out information that's not giving the correct view and perspective of the issues that are at hand, chances are that the next time you come with reports, nobody wants to listen to you because you're always coming with information that's not correct. So those are the two things that I learned very early in my governance lives: how to make sure that I'm communicating such that the value of what I want implemented is seen and the buy-in is accepted, and two, to make sure that you're a trusted advisor. It's okay to make mistakes. I'm not saying as GRC people we don't make mistakes, but it's important that we are careful with what we communicate with the business and not create urgent situations that are not there. But when you create those urgent situations, it must be factual. It must be factual, so that next time you come with your information, people are ready to listen. And I think it all comes out from when we know our stuff, we have the right knowledge, we have the right qualifications, and then it gives you that, let me use the word, superpower to be able to to make an impact that you need to make.
Nice. I love the superpower part. We have actually almost coming to the end of our conversation, and I'm really looking forward to the questions that our participants really want to know. And finally, let's take a little break from our discussion on cybersecurity and the technical call part and dive into a topic that is really important when it comes to work, and that's self-care. We all know that the cybersecurity industry can be quite stressful, and the way it's so fast-paced with the current technology changing. So I'm curious to hear from you. How do you really stay motivated and avoid burnout? Like, are there any particular tips or strategies that you have worked on over the years in your career?
Yes, and I think it's a very important thing because burnout can affect our mental health as well. And as I've already said, that you need to be a trusted advisor and be factual about your things. You can imagine if you're burnout, there's no way you can think straight, and it's very, very important. And I think that I have gotten to that stage when I've been burnout, very, very bent out, and very difficult to manage my space as well. But what helped me is my coach that said, look, when you're bent out, you can't work. So your day starts from, I would just say 8, but in this day of, remote working, your day can start like 6 because you have meetings with people across the world and they are waking up earlier than you. You find yourself having to sit in meetings at 6 a.m. And so it's important that you give yourself that 8 hours stretch and break when it's time to break. Because if your mental health is not working well, you are not going to be a good professional in the first place. So that's how I try to manage. And ever since I have had that interaction with my coach, it's something I work on very, how do I say? I don't miss it. Once I'm tired, I take a break, I stop, and I make sure that I only go in again the next day. And it's very important. It's also important to take leaves on time. We have leaves for a reason. And so you take a leave, go out with your family, go out with your husband, have a swim somewhere, sit somewhere and have a drink. Just chill out. It's important. And I think those are the things. Have something aside work. Sitting here is actually a chill out for me. Actually on leave, but I'm sitting with you. It's a chill out for me to just have some time to talk without stress. I don't have to be looking at numbers and calculating what's the impact to this, what is the penalty if we don't do this and that. So those are some of the things that you do to release yourself, because you need your sanity to progress and to think properly and to add value to the business.
Wow, thank you so much. I love that you said about taking a break. Oh, okay. Now you're back. I don't know why I keep losing you at some point. Sorry about
Okay.
that. Yeah. I love that you
Can you
said
hear me
about
now?
taking a break. Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay.
Yeah, taking a break is actually very important for our mental health as professionals on a day-to-day basis. And it's so good that you've actually expanded on it, on how you do it on a day-to-day basis. So right now we're going to our questions and answer session. And our first question is from Groovy. She's asking, would you advise someone who wants to become a cybersecurity business analyst to specialize in GRC?
Yes, but I just also want you to know that word GRC is packed. Cybersecurity business analyst, and here we have governance, risk, and compliance. As I've said, it's a very packed word. On themselves are different certifications that you need to do. So as you start as a cybersecurity business analyst, I see more of things like specializing in certifications around cybersecurity risk assessment, and as you scale up, you can certify in governance, governance management. You can certify in compliance management. Yes, and then you sort of broaden your horizon. That actually positions you for the higher roles up, where you manage a bigger portfolio of what do you call it? Cybersecurity, different facets of the cybersecurity portfolio. So yes, I would advise somebody who wants to be a cybersecurity analyst to specialize in GRC, and that only gives you an upper hand as you go up.
Wow, thank you so much. Our next question actually resembles the last question that you've just answered. She's asking, would you recommend GRC to someone who already has a law degree? Do you think the degree comes in handy?
Yes, absolutely. The law degree comes in very handy, especially in the compliance area, even in the governance area, because in the governance area, we're looking a lot around policies, because, policies has a lot of, clauses within in the organization. Yes, I would recommend that it depends on what area you want to focus on. Do you want to focus, if you have a law degree and you want to focus on managing contracts for the organization, you want to understand what compliance entails? Yes, you can do certifications around compliance and governance, but the law degree gives you a very great upper hand, because it gives you insights into understanding how to place compliance requirements for the business, and understanding or certifying in this different facets of the GRC just gives you an added on knowledge, which is perfect. And for me, I don't see, I feel that the different areas just complement each other. I started as an IT person. I've done governance, I've done compliance, I've done some risk management. So just gives a very broad view and how to bring all these things together. Because in a business, you just don't have law sitting down, you just don't have risk sitting down. You need to understand, you need to be able to bring everything together. So yes, there's definitely a link for the law person as well to do governance, risk, and compliance if they want to.
Oh, thank you. We have another exciting question. Like, what's a worst day at work like in the life of a GRC professional?
Each day is when you wake up and the crisis on your hiccup and there's a fine for you. That's a worst day. When you wake up and there's an unforeseen that you didn't envisage, that's a worst day, because then you have to start quickly going through the structures of the crisis management process, making sure that you're understanding what the issues are. Are we communicating? I think I lost you.
I lost you too, actually, but you're back. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, sorry. Just give me 1 second. Yeah, sorry about that. Yes. So, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, so that's my worst day, to be very honest, because then the clock is ticking. Depending on how that disaster or crisis goes, your shareholders are shouting, your group executives are calling, your internal executives are calling. And so that is a worst day, to make sure that you're also guiding the business quickly. There's a clear crisis management process that has been already communicated beforehand, and it just sort of kicks in, and making sure that we're managing the different stakeholders, internal staff, external staff, and all the different interested parties that are involved. So for me, that's a worst day. So I don't want to wake up with a disaster on my hand.
Definitely. So we are actually coming to our end of our question and answer. We have our last question. Nwani Goodness is asking, so it means to venture into GRC, one should have knowledge of project management. She really wants to know if project management knowledge is actually a good skill when you want to venture into GRC.
Not necessarily. From what I said, not necessarily. Because project management starts and stops. It's a tool to give you to be able to use for particular project. You start and you stop. GRC doesn't stop. It's an iterative process. It goes on and on and on and on until you decide to stop work, because you put in a policy. You have to make sure that policy is fit for purpose every year. Every day you need to review that policy. You put in risk management controls. They have to be fit for purpose because things are changing. You need to relook those processes, amend them when it's when they're out of when they're out of their time. And you also need to look at compliance requirements, and it doesn't stop because the regulator is constantly working. So having a project management knowledge may help, for example, if you're doing a defined project. So for example, if today you want to implement ISO for the organization, it's a project that you start, you stop, and then you leave the business to run. Though ISO certification doesn't necessarily stop, because there's an ongoing surveillance visit from the external auditor to make sure that you're still having your controls in place and the ISO is fit for purpose. But that will be the time that it might be relevant. Or if you sort of implementing NIST, for example, in your organization, or if you've decided that you want to have a project to do pen testing for all your critical systems, you could take it like a project and then you end it. But you don't necessarily have to have a project management knowledge to be able to do that. Ideally, I believe in most organizations, a project manager might be assigned, and then the skills and people who have the skills and knowledge will be part of the process to run it. However, there's nothing wrong to have that knowledge if you want to. It's not an issue. Yes.
Oh, thank you so much. We've actually come to the end of our question and answer session. I just want to read out some of the comments from our participants. From Van, she's like, I've really enjoyed this session. Thank you so much, Van. And also, King Angel, the discussion has been awesome. Actually, it's just positive energy throughout the room. And we really want to thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights and experiences with us. Your knowledge in GRC field has been invaluable, and we really appreciate you taking your time to speak with us. Do you have like a party shot that you want to tell our participants before we end the session?
I didn't get that. You said, do I have a...
Anything that you want to tell our participants as we end the session?
Yes. I want to tell our participants that, as I've always told my cyber girls, is to believe in yourself. You're unique. Don't ever think that somebody's doing this, so I want to be like the person. Everybody's unique. You can do everything once you put your mind to it. And that's very important. And also know that the job market is not an easy place. Corporate environment is a very tough place. You shouldn't let your guard down, but you should enjoy the process. It's important to enjoy the process, and knowledge. That's very important.
Thank you so much. I really want to thank our participants that have really been active throughout the session, and also to our cyber girls who are transitioning to different paths in cybersecurity very soon. We hope that they found this discussion informative and encouraging for them to know if they really want to do GRC or any other career paths. And also to our cyber girls, remember that the cybersecurity industry is constantly evolving, and there are always new opportunities to learn and grow. And we wish you all the best in your future endeavors and hope to see you succeed in this exciting field of cybersecurity. Thank you so much, Winifred.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.